I wandered through each chartered street near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice and every band, the mind-forged manacles I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. But most through midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear and blights with plague the marriage hearse. It feels rude to follow upon Westminster Bridge with William Blake's London, a lyric poem that paints the same city that Wordsworth described as the fairest picture on earth with blood and sword. The fact of the matter is that London was written 8 years prior to Upon Westminster Bridge, when the state of affairs really was ghastly. It is a part of Songs of Experience, one of the very few that does not have a counterpart in Songs of Innocence. As he takes a walk through the city, he is witness to the sights of poverty and prostitution, and a city that has come under the strict control of the government. Blake cannot be classed with the usual romantic poets. He chose not to see the world through rose-tinted glasses. He saw it for what it was and wrote about for what it was, rather than airbrush over it with fancy imaginings and idealistic notions, and that truth is perhaps what makes this difficult read worth it. It is a lyric poem written in 4 quatrains with a rhyme scheme of A-B, alternate lines rhyme. Majorly written in iambic tetrameter, each line being of 4 iambs, and iamb being an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. Its easy language is used to create complex metaphors. The twin use of the word chartered in the opening lines describes the loss of freedom and confinement imposed on the city as a whole. Even the river, a force of nature, is described to be controlled. Every person that he meets on his way through London appears to be distressed and in woe. The second stanza describes the fear and anguish that this abstract control, described as manacles created by the imagination, has instilled in the society at large. The quatrain that follows is particularly graphic. It was practiced that children adopted into foster care by the church were made to sweep chimneys, something that does not sit very well with the narrator when he speaks of the blackening. As for the soldier's plight, the juxtaposition of blood and palace says more about the motivations for war than any line in plain speak could. The last stanza speaks of prostitution, and that is what is heard loudest by a narrator who describes it as a taint on the miracle of birth and a plague to the sanctified institution of marriage. Life is not sunshine and rainbows, and anyone who can afford to have that perspective probably has a little more privilege than strictly necessary. Poverty, abuse, and death run amok around us, and it takes a poem like this to be apprised of the misfortunes. And while the understanding of history is most certainly achieved by fact, the empathizing with those in history is accomplished better by poems, songs, and letters. All of that makes London an important read, probably far more important than what I consider to be its rose-tinted counterpart Upon Westminster Bridge, because as much as society has progressed in the decades since, it hasn't been enough to make any of the hardships vanish. It is not an easy read. It is littered with difficult metaphors and unsettling punctuation, but it evokes enough of an image to grasp at an elementary comprehension. The line mind-forged manacles is particularly interesting. It could be that the state of affairs has had a drastic effect on mental health, but it also could be that at that point the anguish was more a product of the mental rather than the actual, and that's, well, a pretty deep insight into the machinations of the human mind.